Chapter 9. I have no idea how long I lay there, crying pathetically. Everything caved in at once, and I suddenly felt overwhelmed by where I was, who I was. I had no idea of either one of them. Twilight said nothing, to my surprise. No questions, no comments, no voiced concerns. She just sat on her haunches next to the bed, with her front legs tucked up on the mattress, and her head resting on them, watching me from a sideways perspective. She wore a quiet smile, and her horn glowed softly in the darkened room. She didn't flinch, even as I started shaking and pounding the mattress with my hoof over and over. The frustration of everything and feeling so useless and helpless, it all just spilled over. It must have went on for quite a while. The light coming through the windows was starting to dim, and I realized the sun must be setting. The sun. Yes, it was the sun, not a horrible death ray. It sounded so stupid now that I could think properly again. My nose ran lightly, and I sniffed to try and keep it under control. My tears finally stopped, but the shaking persisted. A small tissue was put against my nose, and I shifted my eye to see Spike, giving a timid smile while holding a box of tissues. The one in his clawed hand rested lightly against my nose, and I nodded, reaching a hoof up myself to rub it. I was soaked, but it was hard to tell what came from the vases and what came from my nose, or the sweat. Folding it lightly, using the surface of the mattress, I used the dry side to wipe my eye. I was suddenly aware that the inside of my bandage felt a little soggy. Shifting my eye back towards Twilight, I saw that the light blue and purple glow from her horn lit her features in a soft illumination, and it made her look very pretty. The colors complemented her well, I thought. Her smile never faltered as she finally, gently, spoke.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left you by yourself.
I was a little stunned by that comment. I shook my head, trying to tell her that she didn't need to apologize, that it was my fault, but she just gave a little nod, silencing me again.
I know you're going to try and take the blame, but no. It's all right. Sometimes I get wrapped up in things, and I should have thought about how you felt instead. You really have nothing. And that must be really, really scary.
She continued, her eyes almost piercing through me. The words were true enough, and I felt a light, frosty, stabbing sensation in my chest as I heard them. But it was hard to look away from the soft glow of her horn, and I found myself relaxing. There was no tingle of magic. It didn't seem she was using any kind of spell on me. She was just lighting the darkness.
So I want to...
She started, and then frowned. She seemed momentarily unsure of something and hesitated.
I want to help you. There's something inside of you that's hurting immensely, and we need to get it out. But I don't know how to do it.
She finished, looking back up at my eye after she regained focus. All I could really do was nod. Then I remembered I hadn't told her about yesterday either. I think there's something wrong in my memories. This happened before. Yesterday. I finally admitted, feeling a bit better at telling her. Twilight frowned, concerned, but nodded at me to go on. Taking a deep breath, I continued. I was talking to Fluttershy, and something bled through, overriding her voice as something else. But in her voice, still, almost, sort of, if that makes sense. I got a headache after that, and I started to panic. I don't know why. Things just started feeling not real. I felt lost and unsure, and...
Did something similar happen today?
She asked carefully, watching my expression intently. Sighing, I gave a timid nod, feeling vulnerable again. If the guys in the barracks saw me like this, I'd be laughed out of the reserves. But they were all dead now. Yeah, just visual instead, I confirmed, taking a deep breath and trying to relax.
The window. You were staring at it. You looked terrified. So I slammed it shut as fast as I could. I came up here when I sensed... magic.
She spoke quietly. A chill shifted up me, and my left eye nervously darted towards the window again, past her. My body lit up its fight-or-flight response again, but my view was suddenly obscured completely, eclipsed in purple. Twilight had shifted around, so she was blocking my view. I was about to freak out when the tip of her horn touched my forehead. There was a pulse of silver and pale, pale blue, as the colors from the soft illumination washed over my senses again. My heart slowed and I exhaled quietly. Twilight smiled warmly as she heard it, eyes closed as her surprisingly warm horn rested on my forehead. It wasn't naked bone, but covered in a soft, velvet-like substance.
The light calms you?
She asked quietly, after a few seconds. I wanted to say, you calm me. Yeah, the color, I whispered, voice still wanting to hide.
Your coat color,
she revealed, smile shifting to an almost amused smirk. My eye widened, and I glanced at my nearby arm to check, already knowing she was right.
It's the color of moonlight on a cloudy day. Very pretty,
she elaborated. Her amethyst eyes opened, then widened a little as she realized her calming technique had placed her inches from my face. A faint blush drifted across her cheeks, but she didn't move away. She just got a more questioning look in her eyes as she looked into my single one. Hey, Moonlight's kind of a cool name, isn't it? Spike suddenly asked. I started slightly, but Twilight just smiled and shifted her gaze to the left, giving an amused glance towards Spike.
He should get the final say in that, but it is a good name,
she agreed, seeming to think again. Moonlight? I lost my thoughts and just watched the silvery blue drift through her horn. It felt so, well, for lack of better words, it felt correct. Was there a reason I was this color? Maybe I'd resonated with it and this is the color of my life force or something. Whatever the reason, it just felt right. Twilight shifted her attention back to me, smiling warmly again. There was a certain glimmer in the mirrored pools of amethyst that were her eyes, and she appended softly.
He's very good at fixing things, both mechanical and involving Pony's feelings. Repairing? No, too forced. Fixing? No. Feels too literal.
Mend? I offered, giving her a shy smile. It was more abstract than the others, but it had a nice ring to it. Her smile widened, and she nodded in agreement.
Moonmender.
Twilight tested in a soothing voice, becoming the first pony to use my new name. Wicked awesome, Spike chimed in, excitedly pumping his fist into the air. Chuckling, I nodded, careful to avoid skewering myself on Twilight's horn. Sexy. Has a nice ring to it, I agreed, repeating what I had already decided in my mind. Twilight couldn't seem to help herself and burst out into a fit of laughter. And like moons in orbit around a planet, she pulled us along until all three of us were laughing. It took a good 3 minutes before I could breathe properly again. Spike, in his rolling chortles, had fallen off the bedside table and was above my head. It landed behind me somewhere. I could still hear his weak, breathless laughing. I didn't even know why it was so funny, but something about her laugh just drew us in. Finally, Twilight calmed down and rested her head back on her hooves, giving me a pleasant smile.
I think it suits you. Although you don't need to be afraid to say things to me. I hope you realize that. Now I understand that your prior interest in magic went beyond the fundamental.
She pointed out softly. I swallowed, but oddly felt conflicted by her expression. She radiated nothing threatening with her smile and gentle voice, and I decided to just bite the bullet again. I was a mage in my prior life. Utility and supplemental, I think, if I'm remembering right. Spells that shielded, repaired, and physically manipulated. They don't work anymore, I revealed, unable to keep my nervousness out of my voice. Twilight simply smiled, however, before asking,
Does it feel like it's stuck inside you?
My eyes widened a little bit, and I nodded timidly. She smiled wider and nodded, a new light dancing in her eyes that I couldn't quite place.
Oh, this is exciting! An earth pony who has training in magic! I could learn a lot from you. If I could figure out a way to let you use it, it could revolutionize theory and...
She started excitedly spewing. Oh, hey, Twilight, slow down there, Spike shouted from behind me, now standing up and resting his claws on my foreleg. I was a little concerned she was going to start dissecting me, but I decided I could still trust her. Also, I was more than a little curious as to what kind of creature Spike was exactly, now that I had such a close-up view of him.
Huh? Oh, yeah, sorry,
she muttered, blushing and giving me a sheepish grin before continuing.
All three pony subsets have some amount of magic inside of them. Unicorns have horns, which they can use to manipulate the reserves directly through
channeling. I was watching you earlier, I interrupted, starting to figure out what went wrong myself. Her eyes widened, and she let out an interesting-sounding squeak before nodding enthusiastically.
You understand theory, too. Oh, even better. Yes, we channel the energy using our horns to directly affect things. Pegasi use their wings to channel theirs, allowing for easier and much faster flight, while innately having the ability to walk on clouds and other air-based entities. Earth ponies are a bit different, though. Their magic stays inside of them all the time. It's used to strengthen their muscles and give them more constitution. Every pony is different, of course, in how much magic they have and how they use it. I think you're the first Earth pony to try and use their magic like a unicorn,
she explained in one long but very rapid instruction. I blinked and absorbed the host of new information. So my body's geared for one manner of using the energy, but I'm trying to force it to use it a different way. Am I getting that right? Hence the burning pain and almost setting your house on fire, I theorized, sighing weakly.
Yeah, I think so. Your style of magic might be very different from ours, though, so there might be something more fundamental going wrong,
she reasoned, scratching the coat under her chin. Just wonderful. So it was like attempting to use a Phillips to turn a flathead screw. Suddenly my capabilities with magic seemed very, very far away. Twilight seemed to notice my dejected look and shook her head at me.
No, I'll see what I can do. We might be able to get your magic working again, so don't give up yet.
She admonished. Well, maybe we can find something tomorrow, I reluctantly agreed, earning an encouraging nod.
It is a big day tomorrow. Why don't you try to get some sleep? I didn't realize it was so late,
she suggested, suddenly looking back towards the window. Swallowing, I nodded hesitantly towards her. I suppose sleep would do me some good, though admittedly the prospects of what I could potentially dream about made me a little nervous. She smiled and nodded to me before walking over to her desk by the window.
Good. I'm going to stay in the room this time, so I'll be right here if you need anything. Even if you feel like you've got nothing, remember that you at least have me. All right?
She reminded, a warm smile gracing her features. I pushed any hormonal thoughts out of my mind and nodded back to her before resting my head down on the pillow again. Twilight shifted to a softer smile after my eyes lidded, and I pretended to close them. She kept watching me for a few more moments before seemingly snickering at something in her mind and turning back to her desk. A book opened on it as she sat down. Listening to the occasional flipping sound of the pages, I drifted lightly between waking and unconscious thought before succumbing and slipping away into sleep. The day was a surprisingly pleasant one. The sun heated the landscape gently with just enough cloud cover to make it nice rather than overbearing. Yawning sleepily, I stared into the undisturbed puddle of water in front of me. Bits of dirt drifted through it, but not nearly enough to label it as mud. I could clearly see the bottom of the pool through the water, even if it was slightly distorted. The surface of the crater consisted of hardened, cooked dirt. It had splintered in a spiderweb pattern out from the center and looked vaguely reminiscent of a dark brown clay. Of course, there was potentially a bit of clay in it already, so I might not have been that far off with that assessment. Lying lazily in the grass next to the crater, I stretched and folded my legs back under me before looking back up at Twilight. She was a couple of meters away with a strange metallic contraption on its tripod. Now, I knew enough about magic to identify that it was taking readings in the location she set it up in, but the design was foreign to me. We hadn't used magic for detection in my world, it seemed, or if we had, I didn't have any memory about how it worked. She adjusted another dial on it and then darted back to the other side to read the output again, her curious eyes flicking back and forth excitedly. She hadn't said a word since she started taking readings, but I didn't particularly mind. This is why I led her here. And she was definitely finding something, if the clicking on the machine indicated anything. Plus, her excitement was just adorable. I just wished I could help out more. Flipping over onto my side, I watched the clouds pass gently overhead. It was strange, realizing the weather didn't really depend on natural occurrences, but in producing the correct clouds and moving them to the right spots by way of the Pegasus. That had been a bit of a shock when I read about it. Rainbow Dash was on the weather teams for Ponyville, if I recalled correctly. The clouds were still pretty, and these were largely allowed to simply drift wherever they desired. There were no occasions today, or storms scheduled, until the weekend anyway. But today is, Thursday, if I recalled. Keeping track of the time was a bit difficult when I had to find the clock tower in town, to be exact. Well, at least my right eye was uncovered now. Making the trip here through the mud, sinkholes, and hills would have been entertaining without any depth perception. Twilight had to use some sort of minor healing spell on my eye this morning, and it was recovering nicely. Now I just had a tiny little nick to the right of it with an elongated bruise surrounding it. Basically, it looked like I'd lost a hoof fight. Epically. My chest wasn't damaged, it would seem, although Twilight had insisted on checking that as well. She had been horrified to find dozens of scars under my coat that weren't in the nurse reports. They were tiny, some lines and some indented circles. I had no recollection of how I got them though, so it didn't really bother me. You couldn't tell unless you were playing with my coat regardless. She let out a quiet squealing noise and resumed frantically recording things in the notebook floating next to her. Spike, who was sitting on a blue blanket nearby, chuckled at her and shook his head. He had ridden along on her back, helping her carry a smaller container of his own. She elaborated after we had gotten here that it was food. Apparently, she had decided to make a picnic out of it, to my surprise. Oh well. Nothing at today indicated it couldn't be pleasant. I really felt no particular attachment to the crater. It was just a depression in the ground to me. Returning my attention to the sky, I noticed a yellow speck on the horizon and frowned. It was quite a ways in the air and slowly getting bigger. A Pegasus or large bird heading towards us? Yellow? I swallowed lightly and started to worry a little. I hadn't seen her since yesterday, and my thoughts were still pretty fresh in my mind. Of course, it was really my fault for setting myself up like that. I shouldn't punish her simply for not feeling a certain way. That was stupid and immature. Sighing weakly, I saw that my suspicions were correct. The pink mane became identifiable shortly afterwards, and I saw that it was Fluttershy drifting through the sky. She was traveling a lot slower than Rainbow Dash would have, which didn't surprise me. She had said she enjoyed the scenery more than the rush of adrenaline. Her path wasn't directly targeting us, though. She drifted a little off target and appeared to be aiming for a small cloud bank to our left. West? She was also carrying something. Something small, it looked like. Twilight must have heard my sigh and glanced over at me. She followed my gaze and also caught sight of Fluttershy in the sky. She raised an eyebrow back towards me, quizzically, but didn't ask anything. We watched Fluttershy land on top of the cloud bank, apparently totally oblivious to our presence, and not come out again. As I couldn't see her up there, I shrugged and lay back down again, relaxing. Maybe she was just having a cloud picnic? I didn't know if there was such a thing, but if there was, it seemed like as good a day as any for one. My concentration and guess was blown out of the air as a bolt of rainbow streaked across the sky above me with an extremely distinct whistling noise that I recognized immediately. Rainbow Dash was here. Maybe she was meeting Fluttershy for something. Sure enough, she beelined towards the cloud bank and disappeared over it. Twilight had seemingly decided that they were otherwise distracted and went back to her machine's readings, shifting the location of her scanner using her telekinesis. I just watched the bank for a few seconds before I saw the bolt of rainbow shoot away from it again. Raising an eyebrow, I wondered what the colorful Pegasus was up to. After a few more moments, she flickered back into my vision, spiraling this time in a slightly downward pattern. She corkscrewed for a few seconds before bursting out of the dive and slipping sideways, causing a burst of rainbow to keep spiraling where she would have been. Oh, that was pretty. Was she showing off? That sounded like Rainbow Dash. It was too high up to hear anything if Fluttershy was cheering. Well, it's hard to imagine Fluttershy cheering regardless. Rainbow's pattern continued, bursting through the air in the corkscrew again and splashing like she did before. This time, though, she dipped through her own splash, picking up a trail through the air as she zigzagged. Huh! I couldn't help but smile as she wrote out "hello" in the sky using her tail. Very cute indeed. Was an event coming up that she was practicing for or something? Her patterns repeated for quite a while. Every time she let the pattern fade, she'd repeat and write something new in the sky. Simple things, sometimes misspelled. Twilight caught me chuckling more than once as the afternoon wound on, and she snickered herself as she watched Rainbow Dash work. She was practicing, I realized. Showing off was different. This was definitely her training for something. She was at it way too long for it to be otherwise. Every 15 minutes or so, she'd zip back to the cloud for a few minutes. That thing Fluttershy had been carrying was probably a basket. Refreshments, maybe? They really were good friends. I got a little self-conscious at that point. Was I being too nosy? A minor twinge of jealousy went through me, but it went as quickly as it came. Did I wish I had a good friend to spend the day with like that? Kind of, but... Smiling gently again, I glanced back at Twilight, who is in her 14th location around the crater, riding more casually now. We didn't really have to say anything to be hanging out, right? Well, she was more than a little distracted, and this was kind of an experiment for her, but she was still spending time with me, right? Glancing back to the blanket, I pondered up striking up conversation with Spike, only to find him snoring on his back, spread eagle. Well, there went my chances for intelligent conversation. I stared blankly at the pool of water, idly wondering how crazy Twilight would think I was if I just started talking to it instead. Well, probably not more so than she did already. Deflating a little, I raised my head to the sky to update myself on the only other source of activity for miles around. My eyebrow rose as I saw the word rainbow written in the sky, amusingly enough using rainbows themselves. Below it, she was swooping in for another run. My eyes got progressively wider, the more of Applejack she got spelled out. Was this what I thought it was? Twilight caught my expression and also turned her attention to the writing. Sure enough, she veered back around and completed the message with a cute-looking heart symbol in between the names. I guess some things are universal. Still, I had to give her credit. Spelling out her heart's desire a mile off the ground in 100,000-point font size took some serious guts. I was impressed. For being practiced, she was taking quite a risk.
Oh my. That's an interesting confession idea,
Twilight finally commented. I chuckled and couldn't help but smile. Yeah, it's definitely unique to Rainbow Dash too, I added, watching the writing slowly fade. As expected, Dash had zipped back to the cloud once it was completed, probably to admire her work and get Fluttershy's opinion.
Agreed. I wish somebody would confess to me like that.
She spoke wistfully, watching the letters fade. You like Rainbow? I asked, tilting my head towards her. I'd not expected Twilight to match very well with the much more spontaneous Pegasus. Then Twilight's eyes shot wide open and she blushed.
What? No, not like that. Just, I'd like it to be something huge and out there, Maybe?
She tried to explain, looking back down at me. A small part of me was relieved when she said no, I noticed. Well, that's unfair to us little guys without wings or horns, I pointed out, sticking out my tongue playfully. She gave me a skeptical look and rolled her eyes.
Easy there, Romeo. You can't like me if you already like Fluttershy,
she fired back, giving me a sarcastic smirk. Now, normally I would have blushed, but knowing the irony of the statement deflated the amusement factor a few notches. She saw my expression falter inside, putting down her pen and notebook.
Look, I'm not that thick, Mender. Your reaction when seeing her, coupled with this, leads me to think something happened yesterday. Is everything all right?
She reasoned, standing up and walking over to me. I might as well get this over with. Nothing much, really. She just doesn't like me like that. Just give it a few days, I requested, sighing weakly and looking away from her.
You asked her?
Twilight asked in a shocked, somewhat horrified voice. Okay, so now I was blushing. I'd been doing so well, too. What? No. She told Rainbow Dash that she saw me as a wounded animal and she needed to nurture me until I was healed, I rapidly corrected, panicking at the thought of just bluntly asking her. That would not go well. Twilight visibly relaxed, but sighed weakly at the same time.
That seems unlike Fluttershy. Did she know you were listening?
She asked, closing the distance a little and sitting down in front of me. I gave a minuscule nod. She knew I was there, but Rainbow Dash was giving her a hard time about showing interest in me. I'm still not sure if it was an excuse to get out of the situation or if she actually meant it.
Yeah, she probably just panicked, knowing Fluttershy. If she noticed, she probably feels bad now.
Twilight reasoned, looking up towards the cloud bank that the two were on. Well, I hadn't seen them leave it, but I wasn't exactly paying attention. I gave a feeble chuckle. Is it strange that I was a little bit happy that she said it? I asked, suddenly a little unsure of myself. Twilight looked back at me and tilted her head.
Why is that? Wouldn't you be happy if she liked you as more than a friend?
She questioned, seemingly perplexed. Well, I was happy she didn't take any teasing from Rainbow Dash, but I'm also kind of glad she turned me down, even if unintended or unknowingly. I think I needed it, I admitted, a little irked that I had taken so long to make the connection. She looked surprised, but her expression remained largely neutral.
I'm glad Fluttershy is getting more confident. Did you remember anything else, though?
She guessed, being very close to dead on. Yeah. Well, not directly. See, my world had an extremely skewed gender ratio, I think. It was the opposite and then some of the situation in Equestria from what I've seen. I can vaguely remember that I had male friends, but no female ones. Plus, there are definite memories of breeding programs in effect. I'm thinking it was something of a long-standing problem for our species. Well, my old species anyway, I concluded, at least sharing what I had thought about. Twilight considered it for a few seconds before smiling and nodding along.
An educated deduction and as good a theory as any. I'd love to have definite data, but that would go a long way in explaining things in your memories. So you think you're just unused to being around females?
She asked gently. I sighed and considered it. I hadn't really thought about this or put things together in my head on this front yet. Eventually, I just decided on, it's been bothering me, yeah. I've never been this hormonal, to my knowledge. Now, admittedly, my knowledge is very limited, but it's just more of a general feeling I get.
Oh my! Well, what's good for the body is good for the soul, I hear, right?
I suddenly heard from my right. Twilight and I both about jumped out of our skins, and I turned my head to see Rarity slowly approaching. Oddly, she wore a heavier-looking saddlebag set and lightly pulled a wagon attached behind her. A shovel handle was stuck out from a saddle loop at a 45-degree angle. She looked like she was about to do some serious excavating or something, which struck me as more than a little odd considering her personality.
Rarity! You shouldn't eavesdrop on people like that,
Twilight berated, looking irked at the white unicorn. Uh-oh. How much had she heard? Rarity let out a knowing sigh and waved a nonchalant hoof in our direction.
I know. I had not meant to listen in. I was simply nearby looking for gems for my collection and latest project is all. Then I heard two dear friends talking and decided to see if they wanted a little company. How was I to know you were having such an intimate discussion?
She reasoned, smiling politely at us.
And how long had you been listening in?
Twilight asked, giving her an extremely suspicious look. I swallowed wearily.
Oh, not very long. Barely a couple minutes,
she assured, waving us off again. That was pretty much the entire conversation. Twilight's eyes danced with anger now, and she glared towards Rarity. A sinking sensation dropped into my stomach, and I suddenly had the strongest urge to crawl into the watery crater and hide there until I drowned. Rarity watched me for a few seconds before she sighed quietly.
I know. I shouldn't have, and I apologize. I'm not entirely certain of what's going on, but I realize it's bigger than I thought. I had originally come here because I was getting strange signals of interesting minerals that are under that crater over there.
She spoke softly, in an uncharacteristically informal manner. Twilight's eyes shifted in the direction of the crater, and I saw a twinkle of curiosity in them, but she maintained her glare at Rarity.
What do you plan on doing with this information?
She asked, a little warmer this time as she straightened out of her hostile posture.
Well, nothing, if you don't want me to. But as I said, I would really enjoy helping. He is a very nice stallion, after all,
she repeated, giving a polite bow of her head at the end towards me. Twilight frowned but looked over at me, unsure this time. Thinking it over for a few seconds, I sighed, coming to the obvious conclusion. Twilight had spoken for Rarity when we first talked, saying she was one of the few to take things seriously. It wasn't for the same severity of topic, but I had a feeling it still applied. After a few more seconds, I swallowed and nodded quietly, looking back up at Twilight and then shifting my attention to Rarity. I'm not from this dimension. This place, Equestria, it's totally new to me. And so is this body. I remember very little before 5 days ago when I woke up right here in the middle of this crater. My memory's riddled with bits and pieces of another life, though. One where I was something else. Somewhere else. And it wasn't pleasant, I summarized after taking a breath. To her credit, Rarity's face remained neutral throughout, and she gave me a soft smile once I finished. I imagine I probably looked pretty vulnerable.
Thank you for telling me. I imagine Twilight discovered this when she tried to repair your memories,
she deduced, glancing back over at Twilight, who was now sitting next to me. Feeling antsy, I remained standing. Twilight nodded.
Yeah. He's suffering from a unique condition. It has similar symptoms with post-traumatic stress disorder on a more acute factor. We're here today trying to find out more information about him,
she explained, giving the shortened form of what she'd mentioned this morning over breakfast. Oh, and we came up with Moonmender as a name, I added, blushing lightly at my own silliness. It certainly hadn't matched the gravity of the prior statements.
It's a very nice name. Would you let me assist you as well, Moonmender?
She asked, returning to her warm smile, after looking a bit concerned at Twilight's diagnosis.
She's really good at finding minerals. We might be able to find out more about what brought you here,
Twilight vouched, looking back over at me with a smile now. She was calming down fast. Wait, did that mean she was only getting angry to defend me? I nodded. Yeah, anything that can help would be really appreciated, I agreed, shifting away from Twilight's gaze and feeling a bit awkward suddenly. Stupid hormones. Rarity perked up and gave a pleasant nod.
This is an excellent outcome. You won't regret it. The interesting stones are under the crater,
she announced, horns starting to glow. The shovel drifted into the air behind her. Hooves aren't meant for digging. At all. Twilight went back to taking scan measurements for the rocks, of course. Sadly, Rarity complained of a headache 5 minutes in. A half couch came out of nowhere, almost running me over, and she flopped onto it. Unsurprisingly, the shovel was tossed to me instead. A long 25 minutes later, I was down maybe half a meter. It didn't help that neither mare could narrow it down to less than a 4-meter wide area. My coat was soaked with sweat and I felt lightheaded. My technique for shovel manipulation did get better, but my body was still weak. Plus my Hophora was acting up again from the accident before the party. I was going to die here yet. Rarity let out a cheer 10 minutes later or so. Both Twilight and I glanced over at her, me full of hope that the rocks were found and I could peacefully pass out now. Sadly, her eyes were focused upwards, and I watched as Rainbow Dash zipped overhead. Wait, did she just... Sure enough, Dash had heard her and swooped down upon us.
Hey, Rare. What's up?
She asked in a chipper manner. My urge to beat the happiness out of her with the shovel steadily rose.
Oh, we're just digging for magical stones or having a picnic. Do you two care to join us?
She asked politely. Rainbow Dash quirked a brow to her and then shifted her gaze down to the couch. Then she looked over at Twilight sitting next to the scanner, writing. Then to Spike, snoring on his back. And finally, to me, panting painfully in a shallow pool of water holding a shovel.
Sure. Shouldn't you be helping him?
She pointed out. Yes, thank you.
Oh? Nah. He's got it covered. Besides, he needs the exercise.
Rarity assured. What?
Oh, okay. Be right back then.
Rainbow agreed, smiling happily. Traitor! She was gone in a beat of my about-to-explode heart, which was impressive. Rarity went back to sunbathing, and Twilight was too oblivious to even notice it was happening as she studied. Some days, I hated my life. She was back all of 3 minutes later, Fluttershy in tow. The yellow Pegasus took one look at me, sadly and visibly wilted. Rainbow gave her a questioning look before shrugging and trotting towards me.
Hey, how's your head feel? Sorry about yesterday,
she said, looking nonchalant and distracted. All I could manage was an irritable glare through my drenched bangs.
You look kinda soggy. Training's cool and all, but you should watch yourself,
she advised before giving a merry nod and walking over to Twilight instead. Shovels were used for digging, not bludgeoning. Must resist urge to bludgeon. It wasn't a weapon. The conflict drifted back and forth in my mind as I developed an interesting eye twitch. Fluttershy was gone when I turned around, and I sighed. Wonderful. Now she was scared of me. Splat! I landed on my side in the thin pool of mud, shovel jutting up like a weird headstone. Too tired. Forget this.
Rarity? Are we even getting close to the stones?
I heard a concerned Twilight say from somewhere behind me.
The what? Oh, yes, the stones. Oh, oops. There are 3 of them total, and they're in that pile of mud over there,
she informed after a moment. Pile of mud? The pile of mud I excavated out of this pit 10 minutes ago? For a very long moment, I felt like screaming until I passed out. And the urge to change the shovel's weapon classification rose significantly. Slowly sitting up, I let the cool water run gloriously down my back. It felt amazing after all the exertion I just put out. I gave Rarity one hell of a glare, but she had gone back to sunbathing and so she missed it. Giving up the ineffective death stare, I stood, now totally soaked in water and sweat, and dragged the blasted shovel towards the pile of mud, dirt, and rocks I had made. Twilight wandered over to help me search, but it wound up not being necessary as finding them in the pile was exceptionally easy. They were an unassuming gray color. There were numbers painted very, very clearly on all 3 chunks in a bright yellow, however. It was strange. My eyes hurt looking at them. An uncomfortable sensation crept into the back of my skull the longer I looked. Nudging them around with the shovel, I managed to get them to line up. 312? My eyes widened as I recognized the number of the vault I had been tasked to protect.
Weird. What's with the number?
Twilight asked, staring intensely at them. Rarity finally looked curious and got up to her hooves, dispelling her couch and revealing a shaking Fluttershy behind where it had been. She swallowed nervously and carefully followed Rarity over to where we were standing. I did my best not to look at her or make any sudden moves.
Oh my, ugly things. They certainly don't look very magical,
Rarity muttered, sounding unimpressed.
Whoa, they're actually kind of cool. You can see the number no matter how you look at it,
Rainbow Dash exclaimed in excitement, drifting around us in a lazy circle. Frowning, I nudged the first one over on its side using the shovel and was shocked to discover it rolled into the exact same shape and position it was in before. I definitely didn't like these. Twilight's eyes widened as she watched, and she started rapidly writing in her notebook.
They don't follow the normal rules of geometry. I wonder if the effect is physical or purely optical.
As a what? Dash asked, now looking annoyed. She wants to know if they feel the same even after we rotate it, I explained, staring at the rocks. They felt wrong to me. They shouldn't be here. Fluttershy had gotten curious by then, and came out from around Rarity. She sported a nervous expression, and I couldn't help but watch her cute shifting as she got a better look at our find.
Oh, well, whack him with the shovel and see?
Rainbow suggested, sounding as if she were rapidly losing interest. Twilight stopped writing long enough to glare up at her.
Don't you dare! I need recordable results, none of which are how far they can fly,
she warned.
They feel kind of squishy,
Fluttershy suddenly reported, in her typical timid manner. All four of us looked back towards her in an instant, and my eyes bulged when I saw her nudging the closest rock with her hoof, of all things. It sank into the surface of the rock, and she gasped, a suddenly terrified look spreading across her face. Oh, crap.